Hey guys, thank you for tuning in. If you find this podcast helpful, please consider subscribing or sharing. Thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Delicia and this is the OverChurched podcast. We are super excited because we're going to be talking about relational versus transactional churches.
Yeah, I'm Justin. I'm her husband, her better half, her best gift that God's ever given her. And I'm excited about this because I think when it comes to people being over church or overchurched, I think a lot of it comes because they don't feel like they don't feel like the relationships are authentic. I remember I was talking to a friend of ours and she moved to Texas, her and her husband. Yeah. And she hit me and she was just like, I feel like Christians are the fakest people in the world.
Wow.
And I was first, your instinct is like, no, come on. But then I couldn't even defend it because I was like, I know.
But is that just Christians or is that just
I think it's people? A lot of people in general. I think the problem is though, you go into church with a different, you expect it to be different than what you would experience at work. So the expectation is higher because you're like, wait, I thought we were going to authentically, you don't go to work and they don't say, welcome to the family. They're like, listen, do your job or we will fire you. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you don't go to college like, oh my gosh, all my classmates and teachers and professors love me. Like no one does that in any other sphere except church. The first thing is, oh, welcome to the family. We're so glad you're part of the family. Ooh, and we throw that word out. Yeah. And so it sounds relational until, it's like, oh, they only reach out to me if they need me to serve or volunteer or, if I miss a Sunday, depending on how big the church is, nobody even says anything. Nobody even cares. I'm just another number. And so I think a big obstacle for people to trusting church or loving church is it feels transactional instead of being relational. Have you experienced that personally?
Yeah. I mean, I've experienced that. I mean, I remember the first memory I probably have of that is that when we just got ordained as pastors, and I remember this influx all of a sudden of just people wanting to be your friend, right? And just wanting to be because of a title. So to me, when you say transactional, I immediately think of the people in the church rather than maybe staff or somebody of that nature, to the point where I felt like I was being asked to do things or asked to like throw a baby shower or and that meant me pay for all of it. That meant for me to do all of it just to say when I had no relationship with this person, but it was more of what it was seen as. And so I felt like at that point, this is just something that you're wanting because I have a title and we're not even friends. You don't even care to ever ask me who I am, how I'm doing or anything of that nature. So that was the first types of transactional is like, oh, because she's a pastor and because she has so many friends and it seems like she's financially good. Like we weren't even getting a dime at the church. We were working full-time jobs. We were bivocational at this time that it felt and it was perceived as if I had this, this type of background for some reason for people to want to be a part of in that way, but not because they generally wanted a relationship with me. They just wanted to say Pastor Delicia did it for them in that way. So
the transactional experience on you was how congregants treated you as like this property that they had a right to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. That's definitely tough.
But have you ever felt that?
Yeah. I mean, I know what you mean. Dudes don't usually ask me to throw in baby showers though. I've never had that.
That's probably why it's a woman thing.
Yeah,
That's probably
I would say even from that aspect, I feel like you've dealt with that more than because I feel like, first of all, unfortunately, more women go to church than men statistically, typically. So the chance of you being put in situations like that is already higher just because of the numbers. But I think even when it comes to personality types, I don't feel like so much that, because we got it in at the same time, but I didn't feel a huge shift from the men.
Yeah.
So much so at that time, they, if anything, they were like, bro, they let this dude be a pastor. You know what I mean? Like, it was almost like they didn't take me serious. So
you were the joking, very not serious type of guy.
Yeah, I still couldn't believe that. I was like, I'm just as confused as y'all are. Like, I don't know. They had to do it by default. They're like, we really want Delicia, but she's married to Justin. I'm just kidding. But I would say the first time I felt like, man, this is a transactional thing, was not from members of the congregation, but it was more so, if we're being honest, the culture of, I was a youth pastor at the time, just the youth pastor culture.
Yeah.
The youth pastor culture was so transactional. It's sickening.
Just from another youth pastor to
another
pastor.
It's like,
I remember you having this.
I'm like, none of these dudes are, and I say none very vaguely and very loosely and generally. I still to this day have some great friends who
came from youth ministry.
Were youth pastors. So I'm going to differentiate that. But it's still, speaking of the ones that were not, I think the sad thing is I found more guys that were transactional, where it was like this dick measuring contest of, hey, how big is your youth group? And you want to come speak to my thing? I'll speak. It was like this. It felt like that. You literally saw and this is what was dangerous about it. You saw youth pastors do two things. You saw them use students. Yeah. They're transactional with kids, because they knew the bigger, the more kids they could get to their church, the more credit they would get from their pastor or from their peers. So they were now using kids for their own ego, which is transactional.
Right.
Like, they weren't actually meeting these kids, going to schools. Like, it was just, hey, come to my church. It was and the kids, were the pawn. They were means to an ends. But then on top of that, they didn't have authentic relationships with other people. It was all like, well, who do you know? And it was this whole cyclical thing of,
well, we would go into those little groups or gatherings or whatever, and they wouldn't even speak to me as a woman youth pastor.
Yeah.
And so it would be like, cause it's male dominant.
Yeah.
Like
which is crazy when you factor in that most of the youth groups are female heavy.
Yeah.
So it's really weird that more churches don't have more female youth pastors.
Yeah.
When that's the majority of the youth groups.
Yeah. And that's just the spheres that we've been in. Who knows? There could be areas but yes, we've gone to
I've seen them all. I would say, prove me wrong. Email info@legacyaz.church or leave a comment on this YouTube video if I'm wrong. But give me,
I mean, I know a handful.
The first female youth pastor I ever met was Becky Johnson in Jesus Culture.
Becky Johnson, yes. And she's still
gosh, it's slipping me. There was another woman but I'm talking about when we first started. Yeah. I've met more since then, but when we first started, that was the only one I knew of.
No, totally.
But
there wasn't more.
And it's crazy, because if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, which is sad, you see all these, not all, but too many. Yeah. If it's one, it's too many inappropriate, interactions with either a youth pastor or a youth leader. And it's like, maybe if you empowered more women to, be leaders and be seen as pastors and stuff, as a director, or even if you're one of those church, we don't believe women pastors, then go ahead, do the punk move, call her a director, and have the same expectations. But,
and if she chooses to take that,
but my point is, they don't even see that as you don't see that as a pathway for a lot of women don't see, I'm going to be a youth pastor. They're like, I'll be a worship leader, because
they never saw it,
because they haven't seen it. Yeah. But I'm just saying,
yeah.
So then you go back to the real world, the relationships that are seen, and it's like, it's super transactional. And again, we're not speaking for everyone. Again, some of our greatest friends are former youth pastors or still youth pastors. So it's not about that.
If there is a pastor who's listening to this, I would say, the best thing you can do for you in your ministry that you are leading, whether that's a church or a youth ministry or any other type of ministry, is have real relationships.
Yes.
Just invest in having authentic, genuine relationships.
Without
knowing who they know or knowing what they do or who they're connected with. Like, just have genuine relationships. And I think that that's taking a turn in some places, just not as much as we would like to see.
So I want to stay on that. So the reason, so you we talk about experiencing transactional, I don't even like to call them relationships because they're not real relationships, but transactional relations within the church. You said you experienced it as a pastor, feeling that way from the congregation, like they just wanted from you, but they weren't really for you as a person.
And I think many women feel like that in ministry.
Okay. And then I said, I saw it on a staff level where the problem with the culture, but then that role is like, it's who do you know, not who actually knows you, and who do you care about like that. But I think if you're feeling that at the top, it's going to seep into the congregation.
100%.
So I think when the average person then comes into a church and they don't have any notoriety, they're not a huge giver or donor.
Yeah.
It can be really easy if the culture of the staff and the pastors or the leadership is trending in that direction, then of course it's going to feel, because a lot of people say, I went to this church, but it felt really cliquish, and things like that. And I think, well, that's a natural byproduct because, that's kind of how it operates at the top. And so if people within the congregation aren't really known or don't feel seen or connected with pastors or leaders, then of course new people coming in, they're like, I don't know them. I want to know who's the closest person to get to advance what I need,
Yeah.
And I think that's where it gets dangerous. And I think that's where you see the trickle down effect into just the average first timer or
why people feel, I think, even coming into a church, you have felt the fact of they just wanted something from me. Yeah. We did hear from friends of ours that now serve with us at Legacy. It's like where they were at, they were serving every Sunday and never asked, how are you? Wow. And how are you doing? And what's going on in your life? Like just taking that moment. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a firm believer on you need to do your part and own up to what you don't do as well.
Oh, we'll get into that in a second.
Reaching out, that's not what we're talking about here. There's no victim mentalities here in that way. But as the leaders, we're talking to the leaders here of check yourself and really ask yourself, do you really care for these people?
Yeah.
How do they know that you care?
Yeah.
Do they feel that you care?
Yeah.
Because what we always say and what we have heard, and I think it was Reggie Joyner that ever said it first, was that people only
they don't remember what you say. They only remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
Did he say that?
Or that you care.
He
would say that you care. They don't remember what you say, but they remember how you care. And like how you had seen them, and if we're chopping it up, Reggie, I'm sorry. But also it's like that was profound for me in youth ministry, especially. And youth ministry, I feel like we have had relationships to this day where we're having now our youth who are adults calling us and telling us about what's going on in their life and what has happened and the things that they are accomplishing and things that they are struggling with. But it's because why? Because they
knew we cared. Yeah.
We cared. So I think that's just something that I want to say to all leaders.
Well, I want to flip it a little bit because I do believe that part of our responsibility as pastors is to take accountability and ownership of the areas where we've fallen short.
100%.
So the same way we felt or,
indifferent
and, transactional experiences, relationships. When is a time that maybe you treated someone transactionally, even if it was unintentionally, but that's how they felt?
Yeah. Man, let me think about it.
I'll go first because I can think of one off top. Yeah. I remember, so we started off, you mentioned it. We started off in youth ministry. I don't know, the reason we got into ministry was because of relationship. That's what I think is important. And I was going to get on that too, is I think one of the major problems when it comes to, pastors and churches is that people don't even realize your pastor doesn't have any authentic relationships that he or she can turn to. And that becomes a problem. Yeah. But another problem, not to make them victims, is that they don't invest in people relationally well. The only reason I became a youth pastor is because my pastor at the time, Uncle John, we call him Uncle John, but his name is John Butcher. He discipled me. He was relational with me. He invested in me. And
he did vacations.
But it was no strings attached. There was nothing I could do for him. I wasn't, you know what I mean? He had his own family, his own sons. He just made an intentional deposit and decision to disciple and invest in me relationally. And that changed the trajectory of my life. But anyway, because of that, we had no problem giving our lives to that church because they gave their lives to us. It was a relational exchange, and it wasn't transactional. But when God told us it was time to go, we left bivocational, all in on that church in California, uprooted, moved our family to Arizona to work at a church in Scottsdale, Arizona. Shout out Impact Church. They gave us our first position. Travis and Natalie Hearn gave us our first full-time roles in ministry and took a chance on us. But I remember being a young youth pastor and, moving. And I remember I felt, and this wasn't to blame anybody, this is me taking ownership. I felt such a pressure to prove I was all in on the new place and go all in on these new students and social media was kind of new-ish back then.
Yeah.
But I remember posting so glad to, I can't remember verbatim what I did. All I remember is I posted a lot and I started posting, all about Impact and all about those students and all these things. And I remember how devastating it felt I ended up hearing how devastating it was for the kids that we had just left, who we had spent, over 4 years with as their youth pastors, their only youth pastors.
And we knew how hard
and that was the hardest transition we've ever made when it comes to,
hands down.
because it was all we knew, and I'll never forget. It's years later, all these kids are grown now, but I just remember thinking oh crap, I never wanted them to feel like I was moving on to something better, or I loved them less, or I've forgotten about them, or and I remember though that's how they felt. They felt he doesn't care about us anymore. It's these new kids now,
and it's because he's getting paid,
and it's because I'm getting paid to do it, and it's
bigger.
It's bigger, yeah. Well, yeah, we came from a church of 300 to 3,000, and so on the outside, internally, no one knew that that was the hardest thing we ever did.
Yeah.
And we were crying and it was just so much. It was such a hard decision. And we were trying to figure out I was trying to, in my mind do it perfectly, but I was well, how do I say goodbye while also not making these new kids feel like I'm one foot in, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I just dropped the ball on that. I never. And it's something that was unintentional, but people don't go off your intentions. They go off of what was done. Yeah. Nobody cares about what you intended to do. They just care about what you did.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that feeling of, oh crap, I made those students who I invested years in feel like it was so easy for me to just move on relationally or emotionally. And, that was something I had to deal with. And we,
and grow from.
And I made sure I tried to, I took that, because after that we eventually transitioned from Impact. And so I always tried to make sure that we kept fostering relationships and never, to my best, not that I did it perfect after that, I don't know, but at least I was aware of it, of oh crap, that was, you don't have to neglect someone else to prove to someone else. And you don't have to, you don't have to.
That's good.
So okay, that was me.
You don't have to neglect someone else to prove to someone else.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good, babe.
Once in a while, I have these gems that
you do. You have these gems, but for sure.
What about you? When's the time maybe unintentionally?
Man, mine is whack. I feel compared to yours,
maybe you're just a better human being.
That was that was
you could
deep,
just be a better human being than me.
I was wow, Yeah. You brought up something that I was like, dang, that was hard. That was a hard season that I think we've kind of blocked out for some time because I just remember that you did try your best through all that. Like you were visiting kids in their homes to try and let them know, like, I love you. We're leaving, and this has nothing to do with you. So that was a hard learning curve for sure that nobody could have helped us with at that time, unfortunately. But I think transactional, when I think of transactional, I think when I started getting into the mega church, you know, you would have a list of people that you would call and they would have on standby kind of, because there's people who don't work or don't, are retired or whatever the case may be that can come in and help with projects. And I remember I got one of these ladies and she came in and she was helping out so much. And I just remember at this time when I saw her, she was a mom of 2 young girls, one who had special needs and her husband was working, and you could just see like they were constantly just trying to strive in life, you know, and survive in it. And so I remember that I felt guilty because of the fact that she was helping me so much with this big project and event that was happening. And I had called her, I never knew anything about her. And I remember that she would constantly want to talk and everything. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but I don't have like time. And it was like in that moment that I felt like Holy Spirit was really convicting my heart and telling me, like, remember why you started this. Yeah. Remember where you came from. And because like you had mentioned, like, we know about relationships because we came from a church and leaders and pastors who did nothing but that. Yeah. They knew everybody in that church. And yes, it was 300 people. And yes, they can know them like that. But honestly, they really have taken this whole thing of like, yes, they want to grow if that's what God has for them, but they're also okay and content with where they're at too, because they're stewarding it so well with relationships. Right. And so it was in that moment that I realized I need to give this woman my time. Like, I need to know her. I need to pour into her. So I remember I took her out to lunch and I mean, she was in tears practically of just the fact that I took the time. And I felt like I was really a nobody, but she felt like I was a somebody because I was on staff at a church. And it just showed me in that moment of like, I don't want to be this leader. Yeah. I don't want to be this leader. I don't want to just ask people of things and not even know who they are and who I'm really asking in that moment. Now, we are lead pastors now. We don't get to know every single person's story in that way, or get to be at every single person's birthday and everything else, which we'll talk about later on. Yeah. But at the same time, the people that we do get to pour into and do have that connection with, we always encourage them that they need to be that to other people. And it's our biggest thing that we tell our leaders. Yeah. That's who we are. That's our heartbeat. If you're not caring for people, then you're not here with legacy. Yeah. So
that's good. I think that what is sad is that it's like that thought a lot of people have, like, oh, I just don't have time. But it's like, well, you have time to ask them to do things for you. You have the time to do for them. You know, it's sad.
It's not really a good mindset to be in as a leader.
But we
have to break that. We have to break it and break that mold and allow people to know this time is investment. Yeah. Because it's going to cost you later because that person eventually is going to leave. Yeah. They're going to leave.
And if they don't, they should.
Yeah, they should.
They should. Like, I don't think anybody should constantly, because, and we'll talk about that in another episode. The whole, it's for God or honor. We got the honor culture and all this BS that people try to use to manipulate people. BS stands for bologna sandwiches, by the way. I don't want to get canceled on our first episode. But let's flip it though, because, okay, yes, absolutely. Pastors, Christians can unintentionally or just without caring be transactional. Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely.
Absolutely. We can fumble relationships and not being truly relational. But what about, like what you said, what about the people that are expecting, like, well, why aren't you at my baby shower? And why aren't you at my birthday dinner?
Yeah.
And why didn't I get invited to this? What are some unrealistic expectations that you've seen people place on others within the church when it comes to
I think this can really go back to women, like women in ministry. Because like you
so
said,
you're saying dudes just don't even care.
No, I think there is like, it's a handful. Like,
yeah. No,
said,
I'll get on the guy.
You haven't, that's your story to share. I have seen men do it. But I do want to make it a point to talk to the women of that, because even being now a lead pastor, but just being then at the time, like a youth pastor and just somebody in the church, just serving, I still got that because they thought I had held some title or position or whatever, you know,
or just you're part of my church. Yeah.
And so I would say to the women is like, that's not fair unless you yourself are going to tell, you know yourself that you're going to be at all those things. Like, I'm a mom now of 3. I love the people that we get to serve with and be with. But at the same time, I'm like, I can't make it to everything. And those are creating healthy boundaries for me and my family, because somebody's going to have to pay. And those somebodies don't need to be my children.
Yeah.
And so, or my marriage.
Yeah.
Or the people who have my family, like right now. So right now, you know, in this time, we're dealing with my mom having cancer, and it's a hard time because of the fact that even though my mom doesn't want to ask more time of us and she's so respectful of it, I'm moving around my schedule right at this point and canceling things because of the fact that that's what takes priority. And I want to say to those that are having this high expectation of people to, well, they never invite me or they don't tell me about it. And why does so-and-so get to go? Like, stop, because at the end of the day, you yourself are not going to be able to make it to all those birthday parties and anniversaries and every little thing and event that they have. And if you do got the time, that's great, but don't hold that expectation like that. Hold people to where who they really are and have grace for them. See them as great, as in a graceful manner of like, you know what, if they would have made it if they wanted to. I know that,
or if they could.
Yeah,
not that they didn't want to.
Not that they didn't want to, but if they could. Think the best of people before you think the worst. Oh, that's a good one. And so I would just want to state that it's so vital for us in the church to remember, like, if you want to go out with somebody particular, like, ask yourself why. Because I think that some people like this idea of these friendships or think that this is going to be a great relationship. Like, I know that I've gotten lots of women in the church that are like, oh, I want to have coffee. I want to do this. But like, do you really? Or is it just because I'm the pastor? Like, if I was just somebody sitting in the chair, would you really want to get to know me?
Which you should.
You should.
If you actually care about relational, if you or yourself are a relational person, a relational Christian, it should not matter who it is. It should be like, hey, if you're sitting next to me, like, I think think about how weird it is to go, like, if you come to our church, it's about 90 to 100 minutes of an experience.
Yeah. Because of us.
Because of us. We don't believe in 20 minutes TED Talk sermons, but we will if we have to.
We'll get there.
But my point is, if I was sitting next to somebody for 90, 110 minutes, whatever,
right,
and it's a spiritual, it's a vulnerable environment, right? It's spiritual. I would want to at least know the name. Hey, who are you? Like, who am I sitting next to for this long? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's how, and I'm not saying, I mean, maybe if it's your first time, like, I get it. But if you've been like, you come to the church regularly and you never even ask the person sitting next to you their name.
Right.
That's not relational.
No.
But yeah, you want people to know your name. You want people to, you know, well, I don't feel like anybody reached out to me. It's like, you don't even ask the people who are sitting next to you who they are. Like, where your kids, like, you don't. And so, but what you said made me think of, because I think everything we say or talk about should have a biblical base. So 1 Corinthians 13, What's the difference between a relational or a transactional relationship? This is how he describes love. If you love people, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous. Why didn't I get invited? Why do you invite them? You're not loving those people well. Or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way.
Wow.
It is not irritable. It keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. But I love the part about always hopeful. I think that relational relationships are the ones where you're thinking the best of people and you're wanting the best for people, not just from people, but you're like, I'm hoping
for people, not from people.
Yeah.
And that's the key to not being transactional.
Yeah. Yeah. How is this relationship better for you? Yeah. Not just what can I get from you? Yeah. I agree with that. And so I think this goes into I think we got to stop being unrealistic about the church, right? Yeah. All of us are broken people. We're all in some way, shape, or form thinking that we're trying to do our best.
Yeah.
A lot of us have families. We have all these things going on. If there's a way we can grow, just say it. Tell us, let's get better. Don't complain. Don't quit. Don't just, they didn't say anything. It's like, did you give them an opportunity? Did you say, hey, I would have, when there was a girl in our church we respect, I love her. She told you straight. She was like, listen, I need community. I'm here. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to just vocalize. I'm going to tell you, I would like to be, certain things. And
I don't think I've ever had anybody.
But just be honest. Right. And then you were able to be honest with her. There's gonna be some things where I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to be able to be out, or I'm not going to, but the fact that I know that you want, to the best of my ability, I'm going to make myself available. Yeah. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's an authentic relationship. That's real.
Yeah. 100%.
It creates a boundary of realistic expectations for both of us, but also the acknowledgement that we want the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just, how can we get there?
Yeah.
That's best for both people. And I think eliminates the transactional thing.
Yeah.
To where it's not, that prevents her from thinking, if you're texting and calling her, it's because, hey, can you serve this Sunday? Right. Or, you know what I mean?
Right. And that's why we push our leaders all the time to be have you checked on people on your team? Have you actually talked to them?
Because then that's a team.
Yeah.
People this isn't a job where it's like clock in, clock out. Yeah. And as long as you do your job, it should be a team. So here's my last question. Because I really don't, I in my experience, I don't have a lot of dudes that are super unrealistic. I do some, but but those guys,
I feel like men don't say it though.
Oh, that could be fair. That could be fair. That could be very true.
Men don't really say it to another guy.
They don't want to be that guy. They don't want to be that guy. That's a very good point. That is very real.
Because I've heard men complain, but they're complaining to not the person.
They complain to their wives or something like that.
They complain to your wives and things like that.
I think typically what I see unrealistic expectations for dudes is not so much just the hanging out thing. Mm-hmm. It's more of the, but it's not, I wouldn't label it as transactional. There's a whole nother thing we could have a conversation in terms of people are OverChurched just because they had unrealistic expectations of their role.
Yeah.
Right? I think I should be doing something that I'm not.
Yeah.
But I think we should, we'll get back to that another time. Because that's where I see more dudes wrong. Dudes think why am I not? Why don't I have this? Or why am I not over this? Or why am I not? And it's bruh.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think that we do need to have an episode of just that, particularly what we're talking about. Yeah. But I do feel that it's unfair to say that at this point, there's not men in this place, or I've never complained to you of we don't hang out. You don't call me, bro.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's, okay, yes.
You know what I'm saying?
It's that just goes back to you don't call me.
Yeah. And it's both, right? It's both but also I think men are coming into this place of, and not as much as before, but even more so, of being okay to say how they feel.
Oh yeah. That's because
being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Being vulnerable and saying, hey man, I've seen you in those moments. Yeah. So I was just wow, I would have thought I would get invited to that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
There's different things of that nature. But it's well, but do you even check in on that person?
Yes.
Or even
yes.
enough for them to even think about you?
Yes, I do agree. There are times I can't remember what.
Yeah.
But I remember
yeah.
There's probably been more than one where I'm like, dang, I didn't get an invite. You're right. We dudes, hey, if we're honest, we do feel a way when we feel like we're closer with somebody than the reality of than the perspective of what they apparently thought we were, you know? I still don't think I think that we need to come back to love our 1 Corinthians 13 though, because it's okay to realize that, oh, I thought we're just, and that doesn't villainize the other person. It's just, you need to accept the fact that like, and it's not that they think less of you. It's just like, hey, they have their 4 or 5 and maybe they don't really know you like that. And they're just a great person. I think sometimes we get tricked within the church because some people are so nice that we think, hey, that's my guy.
Right.
And it's just because they loved you so well or so much better than other people that you thought you were close and they were. And they're like, oh no, bro, I'm like that with everybody. And you're like, oh, I thought it was us, you know? Yeah. Because you get some people that they're just so loving and nice and they make you feel so seen that you're like, I'm coming to coming to the bachelor party. I'm coming to the, and like, oh, I didn't know it was his birthday. Like, why didn't he come meet? I didn't get to the invite to the dinner or the cigar bar or why didn't I come to that? But that's still, you can't. I think that's just, that's what, and coaches be like, hey, you got to know your role, man.
On the team.
You got to know your role in the team. And that's not, everybody's not LeBron and Dwayne Wade, you know, sometimes.
I don't think it's for you to have expectations of people. I think it's for you to understand your role.
Yeah. And to love them, just love them for where you're at. Love it. Appreciate it for what it is. Role. Appreciate it for what it is, you know?
Yeah.
And that takes humility.
That does.
But that's a part of love, right? It's like, love is not jealous, boastful, or proud.
Yeah.
And pride will tell you, oh, okay, that's how it is. Oh, I thought we were, that's pride. Yeah. Humility is like, oh man, I hope he has a good time then.
Right.
I hope he has a good time.
Right.
And you know what? I'll take him out when he gets back. I don't have to get invited to that. I'll take him for coffee or we'll go grab donuts or something when he gets back.
Yeah.
And I think that's real relationships where you can tell yourself it's transactional when it's really not, just because you don't want to put the work of making it relational.
That's good.
And sometimes you have unrealistic expectations.
Dang.
And that doesn't make them transactional. It's just like, I don't know why I want to tell this story so bad, but I don't know why I was in high school and I was in a science class. And I'm sitting in the back, not paying attention. I'm talking to this girl, and she's talking about some dude. She was telling me and her friend about some interactions she had with some boy. And she was like, I came to his, and I was texting him, and we were doing all these things. And one day I asked him, like, hey, why haven't you taken me out or something like that? And the boy texts back, he's like, hold up, you thought you was the main? And she was like, and she was like, but I respected it. And it just let me know my role. And I was like in 10th grade and I was like, wow, that is a deep, I'm not condoning it, but dang, like that dude had boundaries. That dude was a man who understood from a young age. He understood boundaries. And he said realistic and being upfront with people. You had to respect him. I hope he knows Jesus.
I know. What about the third one?
But it's like Christians need that. Like, wait, you thought, you know? Last question. What does, we identify, yes, churches can be transactional. People in the church can be transactional. Yeah. And when we say church, it's the people. It's not any building that is more transactional than another building. It's the people. But what does relational church look like? What does healthy expectations and what does relational church look like?
Relational church, I feel, looks like that, realistic expectations. I think that is.
How do you come to get to that? How do you get to that point? Because everybody thinks they're realistic. Nobody.
It's a perspective, right? So honestly, it goes back to me with friendships, right? Okay. Like that's the only way I can think of it because I've had. The best way. I mean, I've had these friendships for now like 10 plus years now, and we started off with the fact that it was frustrating at first because we started off with started off because we just knew each other from school and stuff. The other one, it's like, I felt that Holy Spirit was asking me, befriend this woman, befriend her. And it was because in this time, in this season, and we've talked about it and preached about it before, but we'll talk about this later, is about praying for these friends, praying for actual relationships. So I feel like in the church, how we can be more intentional and healthier is praying.
Ask God to send you.
As maybe simple or, okay, Delicia, like, oh, such a Christian thing to say. No, you know what I'm finding out is that if I were to truly watch you in your life every single day, and I say something like that, you really don't take that weight into knowing and doing that. It's not, I'm really saying you need to talk to God. You need to talk to God all the time and every day and about all these things. Yeah. And so for us, we're not the best at being relational. We're just constantly trying to see people the way God sees people. So I think your prayer needs to be, God, help me see them the way you see them. Help me treat them the way you have asked me to treat them. How would you love them the way that you're calling me to? And asking for those relationships that you want as friendships, because you need to pray about your friendships. But being healthy in the church, I think, looks like of the fact of putting everything back to, this is about, I'm here to serve, not to be served. And I think that that's really the sacrifice. I think that's really the understanding. Before you ask for something, actually ask, how have you already given to them? Before you want to take. And I think that looks different for everybody within the church. So I don't have like a blueprint, 10 steps types of thing, but I know how you love words. So you're going to have all these steps.
Well, I think it starts at the top. I think if you're talking about creating a relational culture in a church, it has to start at the top, meaning, are the pastors relational? Yeah. I think the saddest thing that I've seen is that if you were to ask 10 pastors, how many of you guys are discipling other guys? You might get one or two. Yeah. Like if you were to say, who are you discipling? You know? And then, but on the stage, it's like, hey, we got life groups. We got small groups. You need to be in a small group. You need to be serving. You need to be all these things. And it's like,
are you all those
Are
things?
you doing any of those things? You know what I mean? And even if you're not doing all those, does it start with, Jesus didn't say, go make small groups of all nations, go, have 10 services and baptize 1 million people. He said, go make disciples. That starts with relationships, because the problem is if we reverse engineer it, you can be transactional in, hey, come to this church to get baptized. That can be a transaction. We count the baptisms. We count the people that raised their hand. We count how many butts are in the seats. But how many people have you personally discipled, pastor? Yeah. Like, or how many people are you discipling? Yeah. Like, I think the saddest thing is like so we made a decision coming from the experiences we've seen, being youth pastors, and we've seen it super relational. We've seen it not as relational. And we said, okay, not to demonize or villainize anybody, but how are we going to do it? We made it a commitment that as senior pastors, we are not absolved from discipling people intentionally within our church. And so on our schedules, our sacred times that are marked out where we intentionally on our calendars, we are meeting with so-and-so. Yeah. That it's essentially discipleship that we commit to pray for, we're doing life with, and it's not about, and it's not ministry related, it's life related. It's not like, okay, well, how are you growing the youth ministry, or how are you growing the worship team? No, it's how are you? Yeah. How is your relationship doing? It's that actual one-on-one. And it keeps it being relational so that it doesn't ever get to it protects the relationship and doesn't allow it to evolve into unintentionally becoming transactional, right? That's the goal. That's the heart of it. So I think it starts with pastors doing it and then holding your staff accountable to doing the same thing, right? So the people on our teams, they're responsible for leading Bible studies or life group. Right. You know, there was like, hey, if you're one of the responsibilities is you have to be doing life with people and pouring into people relationally,
right?
Regardless of whether they serve or what, like, it's just these people. And so I think if you start that culture from the top, it can then be expected to trickle down to everyone else because it's being exemplified, right? Yeah. What's being exemplified can then be expected to be repeated. And that's how you kind of create that culture. And then I think, man, it's time to wrap this up. I'm losing my voice. I think relational church looks like a lot of people committing to living out 1 Corinthians 13.
Yeah.
I'm coming here. If I don't have friends or people I'm going to first show myself. I'm going to go love on those people. You know, and it's hard. And, you know, even that verse, he who wants friends must first show themselves friendly. Another translation, it's stressful because you open yourself up to being attacked and to being disappointed and all these things.
But that's not being promised that it's that the fact that those things won't happen.
Yeah.
Relationships is hard.
Oh.
Relationships hurt.
Because transactional ones don't.
Yep.
If I'm transactional with you, I never get close enough to get hurt. And so sometimes we're transactional because it protects us. We think it protects us. Yeah. But then we end up being frustrated when we feel used.
Yep.
But it's like, well, you were never really, you know?
Yep.
So, dang.
So much.
So 1 Corinthians 13, that's your OverChurched community. Read it. Study it and really
meditate on it.
Yeah, but like allow that to be the filter for how you're viewing relationships.
100%.
Like allow that be the filter. And then, hey, go apologize. Yeah. Take ownership. Like if you've been transactional with certain people,
ask them this, and this is what we ask each other. Mm-hmm. Like, I was just talking about that this morning.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Every birthday, I ask my closest friends with me because I'm doing life with them. Mm-hmm. These are the people that I either feel called to be doing life with, or even just the fact that they feel called to do life with me. Mm-hmm. And I ask them, how can I be a better friend to you this year?
Yeah.
What can I do as a friend this year?
Yeah.
And it has helped grow us and propel us in ways because I think people need to take a step back and ask pastors, take a step back. Am I relational? Mm-hmm. Who do I even have around me? Does my wife have friends? Mm-hmm. Not just me, but does my wife have friends? And if you're a woman, pastor, does my husband have friends? Mm-hmm. Like, that's important. That's so important to ask that. But then people who can actually do life with you, to bless you and to be able to do this with you, but then also that you can help you grow. Yeah. That's about having relationships and being relational and not transactional. And some of them, hey, Jesus himself knew that he had Judas in there.
Yep, and he kept him. Because transactional, I think it's unhealthy for the person who it's not the goal. It's another, but at the same time, it should be expected.
Right.
In terms of you don't have the capacity to be relational with everyone, and you should have the maturity of knowing that everyone that's around me isn't for me. Yeah. And that's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay.
But still,
I'm going to, even if you're transactional with this, I want you to know I care for you. Like, and I think what that did is it allowed, Judas thought he was taking advantage of Jesus by, I'm still getting the money, I'm handling the money, and I'm doing all these things. He didn't know that Jesus was like, bro, I'm not dumb. I know who you are, what you're doing. I'm just making sure that you could never say you didn't have a model to follow. You were never loved. And I think honestly, the realization of knowing that he betrayed someone who was so relational and loved him so much, that's what led him to kill himself.
Yeah.
Because if it had been a mutual trend, like, hey, you know, well, all I do is count the money. All he does is preach to everybody. And like, he realized what he did because he was like, this was the most relational person I had in my life. Yeah. And I gave them up.
He cared for me.
He cared for me. He loved me. He stuck with me. He knew everything. Like, he was God. He knew everything I was doing, and he kept me around. He let me experience all these things, brought me into homes, let me see miracles that no one else, you know what I mean? I got to see all these things, learn from him all the time. Yeah. Even though he knew I wasn't fully invested in the relationship.
That's so good.
And so I think for us, it should protect us. We don't need to demonize everybody that isn't. You're like, don't cut everybody off. Well, don't go around cutting everybody off. Yeah. Just make sure you are always able to walk in the grace and the conscience of knowing I stayed it's not about what you can do for me. I just want to check up on you anyway. You know?
And that's what that scripture brings to you today is like, go love, live, and lead like Jesus.
Yep.
And you will have relationships.
Yep.
And you will be relational.
You will.
Yeah.
That's good. Well,
till next
time. Till next time, do that. Go love, live, and lead like Jesus.
Hamiltons love you. Bye.